Since changing the name of the Eclectic Americana Friday morning drive time radio show on January 20th, 1989 to the Bushwhackers Breakfast Club, the DJs in the collective have strived to entertain and inform our listeners. Airing from 6 to 9 a.m. Pacific at KZSC 88.1 FM in Santa Cruz, California, the Bushwhackers usually have 2 interviews a week, each airing for about half an hour. We're not afraid to ask questions or admit that we don't know something, and we don't mind taking deep dives or following a tangent as we get into how sausage is made in local, county, or state politics, or learning about things going on in our community, or discussions with artists. Our interviews are not scripted and are produced by myself, Dangerous Dan Orange.
Good morning, KZSC. You are on the air.
Good morning. How are you?
We're doing terrific. Gail Pellerin, 28th District State Assemblymember. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
So, Gail, we've been playing songs about work and jobs and whatnot, and I was trying to look back on the committees that you're on, and I couldn't figure out whether you had a committee that was directly related to that.
To jobs?
Jobs or working?
Sort of indirectly, I guess.
The Select Committee on Mental Health. Yeah, that one qualifies.
Yeah. And, I'm on Water, Parks, and Wildlife and Natural Resources, elections, impacting all of our amazing county clerks and registrars of voters and Secretary of State out there, and then rules and appropriations. So appropriations is the money arm of the State Assembly, where yesterday we met with 755 bills on our suspense file.
Holy smokes.
And passed out a little over 500 of them.
Okay, so a bill is in the suspense file if it impacts the budget.
Yes. And there's different thresholds applied to that depending on the budget situation we're in. So on the Assembly side, the threshold was any bill that seemed to come in with a fiscal impact of $150,000 or more was put on the suspense file. Then we heard those bills yesterday. My understanding from Senator Portantino, who's the appropriations chair in the Senate, his threshold was $50,000. So if the bill had, a slight budget impact, he held it, and they did their suspense file. So big day in the legislature yesterday.
So you said 500 of them passed out. These must have been relatively minor, non-controversial. How did you bundle them all?
I don't know if I'd go as far as non-controversial, but I do. Yeah, and I think that the appropriations chair and vice chair and the staff felt that I think it was like 540 bills that they let out. I think they felt that those bills deserved to keep going, and that that the impact to the budget was either already appropriated, so the money's already in the budget for those measures, or they don't have as a significant impact as the bills. I mean, they held a lot of bills, I think, that had some significant fiscal impacts.
So when you say that they deserve to keep going, that means that they get sent back to rules to go to a standing committee, or does appropriations send it to a standing committee?
So appropriations sends them to the floor. So then we'll hear those bills on the Assembly floor. And if they survive that, then they go over to the other house. So in our case, the Assembly, they go to the Senate, and they go through the same process there. Their Senate Rules Committee assigned a policy committee, fiscal committee, and then the Senate floor.
Now, since it's already gone through the suspense file on the Assembly side, does it go through the suspense file again on the Senate side?
Yes, it does.
Oh.
So we have another day of anxiety in the halls of the state legislature, because everybody was on pins and needles yesterday as we awaited the decisions of what bills got off suspense.
Well, so how did it go? Did things? Do you think things went well?
Yeah, I mean, there were some disappointments and some heartaches, and there's some priority bills for some members that just, had such a huge fiscal impact they did not get let out. Unfortunately, it seemed like a lot of the bills that got held were bills that impacted women and children. Some of our most vulnerable. We have some big ideas to help people, but we're in a very dire fiscal situation. So, and the thing with our budget, there's different ways to couch the budget, because yes, we do have this now 32 billion deficit, which is about $9 billion more than what we anticipated in January. But the reality, and that's a stark contrast from our previous budget cycle where we had close to $100 billion in a surplus. But we have to look at the evolution of the budget over just the last 5 years. And we have gone from spending $140 some odd billion to spending close to $200 billion. So our budget has grown by $50 billion that we are spending on vital programs in the state of California to help children, to help seniors, to help students, and to make sure that people have access to health care, and that we're working on transportation and we're working on housing, and so that we do have a very extremely hefty budget, and we just are falling short of what our anticipation was.
So if you're just joining us, folks, we're talking to 28th District Assemblymember Gail Pellerin here on the Bushwhackers Breakfast Club. I'm Dangerous Dan.
I'm Calamity Kyle.
I'm Chaos.
So, Gail, we definitely want to dive into the weeds on budget.
Oh, yeah.
But doing the math, there were 215 bills that did not get passed out of the suspense file. What happens to them?
Well, some of the bills were made into 2-year bills, meaning that you can maybe breathe some life into them when we come back in January and see if we can get them moving at that point. Some, they just say, are held in committee, and that means pretty much, they're dead. That if I want to, I had a bill that was held in committee. It was a bill that I care very deeply about. It's the Electronic Registration Information Center participation from the state of California. But the reality is, in my negotiations with the Secretary of State and the county elections officials, we all determined that 2024 in a presidential election cycle is not the best time to implement this new data sharing program with other states. So we were going to defer implementation of it anyway. So it was held in committee, and so I will have to reintroduce that bill next year when we start back in January.
Absolutely. So Gail, what gets a bill chosen? What gets one bill chosen over another bill? I know you mentioned that it's financial reasoning a lot, but why didn't that bill go through? You think? Do you have any idea?
Well, no, because I wasn't in those negotiations when staff and the approach chair and met with folks, but I understand. From the outside looking at it, I understand the reasoning because it did have a price tag on it,
Sure.
and it was going to be deferred for implementation. And it just gives them the ability to say that we held bills that were going to impact the budget. And so it made sense to me why they held that bill. So, like I said, I'll be coming back in January to reintroduce that. The other bill that was made into a 2-year bill is a bill that I'm working on with the Semper Virens Fund to allow them to purchase property, open space, and then transfer it to the care and stewardship of the state Parks Department. And the bill was initially laser focused on certain parks that were within Big Basin and areas that were impacted by the CZU fire, and it got amended in committee to expand statewide. So it broadened its scope, and I think that that's not the direction the state wanted to go. So that bill became a 2-year bill. So I'm hopeful in January when we come back that and have the opportunity to hear this bill again, that I will be able to maybe negotiate to get it back into that laser focus so we can move it through for our parks here. But it's like when you have a good idea like this, all the parks in the state are like, well, me too, we want to do this. But the reality is the State Department of Parks can't really take on more land to care for than they can afford. So it does have would have a very broad fiscal impact if it were applied statewide. So, I got some negotiation to do there and some work to do on that bill.
So going back to budget, if we follow the issue of money, what is the May revise?
Okay, I didn't. You kind of broke up there a little bit, but I think your question was, what is the May revise?
Yes.
Okay, so in a normal budget year, or where when the May revise comes out, it's based on those April 15 property tax bills that had been, or payments that had been made, because that's normally when our taxes are due, right? As far as our income taxes. And so because those personal income tax and capital gains, and California does rely very heavily on income taxes from our wealthier residents. And because 2/3 of the state got a deferral of paying those income taxes to October, we did not have the benefit of knowing where we really stand income tax-wise in May. So the May revise is typically put out after we have a better idea where we are, but we've deferred those. So, and there's, like I said, been huge drops in the stock market and the tech sector layoffs and turmoil in the regional banking sector and the federal debt limits. So there's a lot that goes into our California system that relies, like I said, very heavily on those income taxes. So there's that extra layer of uncertainty with tax payments because that filing deadline was extended, I believe, until October 16th. So we're probably going to be looking at, I'm not sure how we're going to do this, to tell you the truth, because come October, we're going to have a better idea of where we stand fiscally and whether that's a more rosier picture or a more bleak picture. We won't know until then.
But since you're on the Appropriations Committee, do you get a big red Sharpie and instructions from the governor to go find X billions of dollars of savings? So how does the legislature fit in to a $32 billion projected budget shortfall?
Well, and what the legislature does is that we pass bills that cost money, and we also pass the budget. So we're statutorily required to pass our budget by June 15th. And so the Assembly is working on its version, the Senate's working on its version, and it looks like we're kind of working off the same facts right now and the same projections. So we're hopeful that we will get a unified budget that we would send to the governor on June 15th that may be different from his May revise. It most likely will be different from that May revise. And then the governor will have the opportunity to either, take action on that.
So California is running a debt, correct?
Say that again?
California has a debt. The state has a certain number of dollars that we owe. Not like the national debt. The state. Do we have a state debt?
So and right now we're looking at a reduction in our revenue. So our revenue projections are not as high as we had anticipated.
So is there a debt ceiling that the legislature has to pass, similar to what we see going on in Washington, in terms of limiting the amount of money that California can borrow and be in debt upon?
So we do have things like the GAN limit, and it gets complicated, and I'm not the expert on this, but we do have spending limits that we have to adhere to as well, which actually sort of was triggered with that budget surplus. So we had that budget surplus last year, and there's a set amount of money that must go to education due to Proposition 98, and then due to our constitutional requirements, there was money that had to go back to the taxpayers because we had collected more revenue than we had anticipated. So there are very strict laws governing how money is to be spent and allocated in the state of California.
Do you have to do another revise and another budget report in October then? Do you have that planned out?
Well, that's kind of what people are talking about, whether we're going to do bills and trailer bills that are going to be sort of trigger bills that say, well, if our revenue is at this level, then we'll spend it this way. Or there's been some discussion of the legislature coming back perhaps in October or November to do any further action on the budget. So, we'll wait and see what happens here. Yeah.
Alert listener Eric just texted in. And folks, if you text to 831-459-4036, it pops up on the screen, even though Assemblymember Pellerin is talking to us on that same phone number.
It's magic. It's witchcraft.
Eric texts in, California must balance its budget every year, I guess within a certain range. Gail?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Eric texts in, California must balance its budget every year. The deficit is yearly. The debt is accumulated.
Yeah, yes, and we do have our rainy day fund that's mandated and our reserve, and so we are in a much better fiscal situation today because of those cushions than we were, 10 years ago before we had that. So that's definitely helpful to us in this situation coming into this fiscal year, and I anticipate this is probably the first of maybe one or two more fiscal years that are going to be difficult because we are sort of going through this adjustment. Like I said, just 5 years ago, we were spending $140 billion, and as of today, we're close to $200 billion. And I think there is some sort of adjustment period that we do need to go through to level this budget off and to level our spending off, so we're not just continuing to add expenditures over the next few years. And a lot of the time, a lot of the money last year with the surplus went to one-time proposals, one-time shot money. And some of those groups are saying, hey, this really helps, this one-time allocation you gave us, and now we want a continuation of that. And those are the ones that I think are going to be impacted in this budget year because the money that was provided was one-time money, and now they're coming back saying we want it to be ongoing. And that's where California needs to look at how we're currently spending the billions of dollars we have, and is it going to the right places and the right programs, or do we need to shift and relook at this?
So I'm looking back at our previous interviews, and when we spoke on February 17th, that was the day that bills had to be submitted. It's now 3 months later, and already one of your bills, the Sempervirens one, has been sort of pushed back to a 2-year bill. Tell us about your other bills, where they are, and what the process is. And I don't know if we have time to go through all of them, but because the process is as interesting as anything else, at least from what, Bonnie, my wife, tells me, who longtime Bushwhacker listener. Take us through your bills, Assemblymember Pellerin.
Well, the crazy thing is that there were 2,662 bills introduced this year.
Wow.
And it's a lot. And my bills are, what do we have here? I have gotten some bills off of the Assembly floor and to the Senate. So I've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bills that are over to the Senate. And I believe 4 of them are going to be held soon in the Senate Elections Committee. And like I said, my 10 bills that I had on the suspense file yesterday, 8 of them got out, so they will be on the Assembly floor, and 1 was made into a 2-year bill, and 1 was held in committee. And then I've had a number of resolutions that I have passed so far, and we've got 3 more coming up for the remainder of the year here. So, so things are good. So basically the process, like I said, is the bills that are introduced in the Assembly go through rules, policy, fiscal, if applicable, floor, and then they moved over to the Senate to go through the same process: rules, policy, fiscal, if applicable, and then floor. And if there were amendments taken in the Senate side to that bill, it has to come back to the Assembly for what's called concurrence in those Senate amendments. So we get to see the bill again before it goes to the governor. And then, of course, the governor is either going to sign it into law or let it become law without his signature, or veto it. And every member has been has had a bill vetoed, and it's got to be painful because you work this bill through the process to get to that finish line, and then you get the veto message as far as why the governor feels that's not a good idea.
But Assemblymember Pellerin, when those times back in the cable age when you were really bored and watched C-SPAN, you'd see committee meetings. How is it possible that 5 of your bills made it through a policy committee and had discussions on them in just 3 months. I guess my mind is trying to wrap itself around the rules, policy, fiscal floor on 5 of your bills already. Did they get committee time, or were they just easy to move? Give us a sense.
A lot of bills are pretty non-controversial. A lot of bills go through a consent calendar. I have a bill on fictitious business names, for example, that says that these business owners no longer have to provide their personal residence address, for security and privacy. It's non-controversial, so I haven't even had to present that bill. It's just gone through on consent. Other bills I have don't have a fiscal impact, so I've presented them in committee, or I've presented them in appropriations when there was thought that maybe there's a fiscal impact, but it got out of appropriations to the floor. I presented the bill on the floor, and it continued to move. And so now I have bills that are over in the Senate and some that I still need to get off of the Assembly floor. And so that's basically how the process goes.
Okay, you brought up a new term. Consent.
Oh, no, I did.
Oh, yeah.
What is it?
The consent calendar. What is it?
Sure, that's an easy
where,
one. Yeah.
Where is it?
So those non-controversial bills that make changes to state law where there's nobody opposed, no organizations, no members. We don't have a hearing for those. They are simply put on what's called a consent calendar. And so that group of bills gets passed out without any debate or scrutiny. Now, certainly a member can pull a bill off of consent. So if there's something on consent that, hey, I do have an issue with this, I want to talk about this, you can pull it off of consent and hear it separately.
And so do they all get passed at once? Like all in favor of the May 11th, 2023 consent calendar that comprises 1,361 bills, say aye.
Well, it's not that many, but yes, I mean that is what happens. So in a committee, it might be just one bill. It could be 10 bills, that are on consent that were deemed to be non-controversial, and we all vote on that consent calendar and know what bills are being moved on without having them presented by the author.
Right. So, Gail, could you give us some insight into like how many bills are controversial and how many bills just kind of pass regardless of whether they don't have much of a fiscal impact or they're put on consent committee? Like what's the ratio there?
Well, and I'll give you some other terms that we have too.
Oh yeah! Yay!
You'll love all this. This is the weed stuff. So we'll talk about passing a bill on an A roll call, meaning the Democrats and the Republicans all like it, and we move it forward. We have a B roll call, meaning that the majority party Dems support it, and the Republican parties members are voting no. And so I would say most of the, there's really only, out of the, I don't have the exact number, but out of the 2,600 bills that we have, there's really only a handful, maybe a few dozen that really rise to that level of being super controversial. There are bills that we do debate on the floor where Democrats have one position, Republicans have another. Sometimes Democrats are not always in agreement, and we have a difference of opinion. So those are debated on the floor, and there will be a split vote where it's doesn't fall in that category of a simple A or B roll call. So, but there's a lot. Most of the bills that we are doing are really bills that all of us agree on, and that's the beauty of this process: is that there's a lot more we agree on than we disagree on.
And those are the A roll call.
Yeah.
So, in the same way that I asked you about the consent calendar, which you clarified, each committee has its own consent calendar. Okay.
Yes.
The A roll call, do those all get bundled together and all in favor of A roll call bills from April 27th, 2023 vote aye?
Well, and the A and B roll call are really applied more in the Appropriations Committee, but I think that people kind of look at that. Those are just standards that we kind of look at. But what he'll do in committee is he'll read a bill and he'll say that's out on the A roll call, and we'll substitute the motion and the second for all A and B roll calls. And sometimes there's little tweaks Like it'll be, we're going to pass on the B roll call with Diane Dixon voting aye, who's a Republican. So sometimes there's it's not a perfect B roll call or A roll call.
And when you
it
say
could be
he,
roll call with somebody not voting or somebody voting no.
and when you say he, is this the chair of the Appropriations Committee?
Yeah, the chair of the Appropriations Committee, who is Chris Holden. So in order to go through 755 bills, you have to have a streamlined process. So basically, when we first sat down and got into committee, the first vote on the first bill was taken. I moved. Another colleague seconded, and then Holden said, we're going to replace the motion and second for all the bills we're hearing today, and then there's the different tweaks of A roll call, B roll call, or any diversions from that.
If you're just joining us, folks, we've been in conversation with our 28th District Assemblymember, Gail Pellerin. This is KZSE Santa Cruz, the Bushwhackers Breakfast Club, a balanced breakfast for a kinder and gentler America. I'm Dangerous Dan.
I'm Calamity Kyle.
I'm Chaos.
We've got B-Movie Bratton in the house. We've got the KPFA News headlines coming up. So, Gail, we've talked all about how sausage is made in Sacramento. A couple of minutes about what's going on down here in the district.
Well, we've got a lot going on in the district, a lot of casework that we're working on. I've got a dynamic team of folks who are getting calls from our constituents having issues with state government, and we are on it and working with them. I'm excited. We are getting our keys to our new district office over in Santa Clara County, I believe, next week. Woo. So I'm excited about that. Today I get to spend the day over in San Jose meeting with various folks over there. And, we've been super busy and having meetings in the office and being out in the community and just having a really good presence and letting people know that we're here to help and assist and participate in events. So if anyone has anything coming up, let us know.
Gail, if you've got 5 bills that have made it over to the Senate, you've got 8 bills that came out of the suspense file to the Assembly floor. And it sounds like things have already moved through most of the policy committees. What are you spending your time with now? Are you doing select committees? Are you taking a break from Sacramento? Give us a sense on kind of where we are in the legislative calendar. We got about a minute.
Oh, well, this is crunch time. There's no break. We are full steam ahead. We're going to be meeting in session every day coming up, and because we have so many bills that now have moved off of suspense that are coming to the floor, we have a lot of debate going on, and so that's going to be a very, very busy time. And I have 6 bills over in the Senate, and I believe I've got a hearing over there on June 2nd, and continuing to work on different resolutions. And yes, I have a select committee on mental health, and we're having our second hearing on that. And we have that budget that we have to adopt, so by June 15th. So it's all hands on deck, super busy time between now and then. And like I said, when we begin this process over the Senate, it's a repeat of everything we just did. And it's a little bit more stressful because there's only 40 senators. And so there's a lot more of our bills that they have to hear than us hearing their bills. So I'm hoping that we have smooth sailing over in the Senate as well.
And do you go over to the Senate to appear in those committee meetings or to lobby senators?
I will. I will be spending time over in the Senate, but I don't present on the floor. I would have to have a senator present my bill on the floor.
Got it. You're behind the scenes. Gail Pellerin helping us understand how sausage is made in Sacramento.
Absolutely. Yes. And thank you guys all so much. It's great speaking with you and looking forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gail.
Thank you, Gail. We'll talk to you next month. You've been listening to a podcast from an interview on the Bushwhackers Breakfast Club on KZSE 88.1 FM in Santa Cruz, California. This interview has been produced by myself, Dangerous Dan Orange. KZSE is a student-run college and community non-commercial educational radio station broadcasting from the UC Santa Cruz campus. You can stream KZSE online at kzse.org. Thanks for listening.